Welcome back to our Ecosystem Summit, the third session. And now, before we begin, and we'll have our first keynote speaker. So may we now invite Mr. Chow, the Associate Director General of Investment Promotion at Invest Hong Kong, to give a keynote speech. Charles, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, friends of the startup community, friends in Hong Kong, in the mainland, and around the world. I'm really delighted to be here to give you a keynote, couple of minutes to talk about the ecosystem. We all know that this COVID situation is unprecedented in the world, and everybody is affected by it. However, we have been really encouraged by all the discussions as it's been happening this past week during the Start Me Up Festival. On Monday, we had the Connected City, and on Tuesday, we had retail technology connection, as well as the Mills today, as well as the Impact Summit yesterday and on Tuesday. It was extremely exciting to see the solutions which the startups were bringing to the table to solve some of the problems that the businesses are facing today. And also, it really gives us a lot of encouragement to see what's next in the future, what is upcoming. All the crisis brings this, of course, there's opportunities. And somebody at the earlier panel was talking about there are two solutions to this. You either thrive, you survive and thrive, or you die, unfortunately. So we believe that Hong Kong has all the ingredients to really be one of the beacon lights of the ecosystems for startups in the world. We will be talking on the panel later on about some of the advantages and some of the great benefits that we're seeing. Hong Kong is a global financial center, and we have all the ingredients to transforming ourselves to becoming an international innovation technology hub, along together with what's happening in the Greater Bay Area with 71 million people, 10 times the population of Hong Kong, just 1 hour away from us. And we are working together, the government, as well as the private sector, the startup community, the investors, the universities, all working together to really transform this ecosystem, whereby startups from around the world, you could come and test their products and concepts. Whether you are in B2B space or B2C space, there's a great opportunity for you to really look at doing ideation to commercialization, bringing your concepts to reality, and to solving some of the problems that the businesses are all facing today. So this is a fantastic opportunity. The Start Me Up Festival this week is a full week of really interesting discussions, fireside chats, insights about what's coming up and what's going to happen in the coming weeks, months, and year. And the Greater Bay Area, you're going to be hearing a lot more about it. We are working together with all the stakeholders in the Greater Bay Area to really make this magic happen. Because all of the startups, when they come in, they're looking for four things. They're looking for capital, and Hong Kong is the ideal place to access capital, whether you are from pre-seed to seed and VC, all the way to private equity and IPO. Great place for people to look for business, new market opportunities, whether you're looking at the mainland China market, which is the second largest economy in the world, or the ASEAN market, or the North Asian market, Japan, Korea, and India. 3.5 billion people living 5 hours away from Hong Kong. This is a fantastic place to do so, to look for new opportunities and new markets. And talents as well. We've got some fantastic universities, and there's a lot of great collaborations between the universities and other universities globally, that the programs that you're going to be hearing about that will really take a lot of ideation to commercialization from the universities, from the research and so on. And finally, not only the talent, but also the corporates that we heard about earlier. And of course, anybody looking for production, for supply chain logistics, whether it is in the mainland or in ASEAN or in India and all the other parts of ASEAN, here, this is the place where people come to do this. So with that, we're very excited, and we have a few more programs this afternoon and tomorrow. And we'd like to invite you to come and join us on this exciting journey to really bring solutions to problems that we're all facing, and then transforming this innovation ecosystem into one of the best in the world. Thank you very much. And I wish the conference a great success for the rest of the day and the week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. Please take a seat. And may I also invite all the other panelists and our moderator to come on stage. So for those who just joined us online, so this is the third session of our Ecosystem Summit today. And in this session, we'll be talking about Hong Kong's competitive advantage as a global innovation hub. And before we begin, here are a couple housekeeping notes. And we'll kick off with the panel discussion first, and then followed by the roundtable discussion, where we invite all of you online and those who are here in person to join in by raising your questions and expressing your views. For those who are online, if you would like to join the discussion, please feel free to press the raise hand button, and then the moderator will notify you when it's your turn. Feel free to turn on your camera and also unmute yourself in the roundtable discussion. And now I'll pass it over to the moderator of our third panel, Mr. Alexander Chan, the co-director at the Mills Fabrica. Alex, please.
Great, thank you, Maggie. So good morning to everyone. Excited to have you here today in person as well as to our audience online. The past 6 to 12 months have been interesting times, not just for Hong Kong, but also globally, presenting challenges, but also opportunities to the startup ecosystem globally. So we're going to touch on a bit of those themes and how it relates to Hong Kong's position as an innovation hub today. But to start us off, I'm going to get the panel to introduce themselves. So maybe we can all do a quick 1-minute introduction of what you do, but also a quick curveball for you, right? What's one word you use to describe Hong Kong's ecosystem based on what you've seen in the past 3 to 5 years? So maybe we can begin with Cindy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Chow, Executive Director of Alibaba Hong Kong Entrepreneurs Fund. I'm running this $1 billion Hong Kong dollar fund to support the startup ecosystem in Hong Kong. And if I would describe the ecosystem here in Hong Kong, it is robust. It is really robust.
I'm Charles Ng. I'm Associate Director General at Invest Hong Kong. I oversee the agenda for innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. If I could describe the word for the ecosystem is transformation.
I'm Peter Yan from Cyberport. I'm the CEO of Cyberport, and Cyberport is an organization 100% owned by the Hong Kong government with the public mission of cultivating, developing the digital technology community ecosystem in Hong Kong. And we would like to see digital technology becomes a new economic driver of the Hong Kong economy. And the one word I would say, vibrant.
Hi, my name is James Kwan. I'm the Managing Director of Jumpstart Media. We're a platform that connects the tech startup community in the region. Our media is distributed in 11 countries. The one word I have to describe Hong Kong is dynamic.
Great. So you guys mentioned about robustness, transformation, vibrancy. Well, first question for you, right? When you look back at, this is the 5th year of Invest Hong Kong Start Me Up Hong Kong event. When you look back at the past 5 years in Hong Kong's ecosystem, what has Hong Kong ecosystem done well in, and where do you see it headed next? So maybe again, begin with Cindy.
Well, the fund was started in 2015. So I think it is the 2nd year when we have the Start Me Up Festival and also the Venture Forum. So for the past 4 or 5 years, I really see the growth of the ecosystem. So I always like to talk about this story. So when we started the fund back in 2015, I was being asked to find a VC firm to help us run the fund. And at that time, I was not able to find anyone here in Hong Kong because we do have a lot of money, capital here, but most are PE, very few or actually none VC firms here, even if they're based here in Hong Kong. Every day and every Monday, they will go to across the border to Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing to look for deals and then fly back over the weekend. But I mean, if you see what we have now, right? So you see there are not only family offices, but also VC firms and also individual investors who are really interested into investing and also supporting deals in Hong Kong. And what attracts them is, of course, there are good deal flows here. So I guess it's really amazing to see what have been happening for the last few years.
5 years ago, or 6 years ago, when we started the journey, it was like 3 co-working spaces here, and now there's over 100 plus with innovation labs, a lot of corporates getting involved with the corporate innovation, co-creation labs. But very importantly, the family offices, a lot of family offices, a lot of high net worth, ultra net worth individuals who've decided to really put their money where the startups are. Instead of just investing into real estate or into the stock market, there's a lot of investment into the innovative startups. And we see that is very, very interesting because this really attracts a lot of startups to come here and take a look at that market. The other very exciting thing is really the people, the passion of the people that we see, the various ecosystem builders, as we call them, the champions. We've seen them really mushrooming up, and that has been extremely encouraging for all of us who started this journey 5 years ago.
Right. Looking back, this 5 years has really quite, a big change compared to what we have before that. I've been in the innovation technology business, I would say, over 30 years now, and I've never seen, such a vibrant, active, development in the past few years. Now, since the establishment of the Hong Kong government's Innovation Technology Bureau, the whole scenery has substantially changed, and the government in the last 3 years, if I recall correctly, have invested over 100 billion Hong Kong dollar in technology-related, R&D developments and so on. So this is quite a substantial change, and as a result, we can see a lot of companies now really like what Charles and Cindy said, the investors coming in with companies really mushrooming, and our community has also grown to over 1,500 companies at Cyberport. So this is really very encouraging. Amidst the current challenges and so on, we still see very strong energy, very strong commitment of these companies. The momentum is still maintaining.
Yeah, so the one word that comes to mind is maturity. So within the 5 years, you actually see the ecosystem continuously maturing. And one example I could always use, Charles mentioned co-working spaces. We went from a few co-working spaces to we're probably going to breach 3 digits worth of co-working spaces in the next year. Another example would be Cyberport, even where Peter Yan is the CEO. Basically 4 years ago, you would see startups that were really idea stage getting into the incubation program. It was really the beginnings of a lot of these startups coming up and having ideas and developing, and Cyberport was a great start landing pad. Now you see people who are Series A, Series B applying for Cyberport because there's a maturity level. They see Cyberport more than just an early stage landing pad. They see it as a place where they could develop and grow their business. So it's really the maturity of the startup ecosystem.
So a lot of growth has happened in the past 5 years. Exciting to see. Peter, you mentioned about big change, right? So I think there's been no bigger change in the past 6 months than COVID-19. And again, for better or for worse, there has been challenges and implications, right? How do you see that affecting the ecosystem in Hong Kong? So maybe begin with Peter.
Sure. I think there are, like what you said, the opportunities and challenges. We tend to look at the challenges on a day-to-day basis. We are facing a lot of this COVID-19 new normal. But then, as you probably are aware, this also brought about a significant change or adoption in technology applications. And people who used to not that receptive to the use of some of the IT applications are now more receptive to that. We can see this happening in a lot of distant learning, home officing, medical services adoption, and so on in sectors that used to be very sort of reluctant in adopting that, in changing their way of doing things. We will see from the past few months there are a lot of inquiries, and we probably will see even more of such adoption in the retail sector, in the general office environment with smart buildings coming up that has proper facilities there, using technology to help identify potential risks for spread of COVID or any other health issues and so on. So these are really quite interesting development that we can see, and all these are adopting or making use of technology like big data and so on. The other day I was listening to one of the pitching of our startup companies trying to use big data to identify without intrusion on any privacy and so on, identifying how frequent people actually wash their hands, whether that's proper behavior in the office environment and so on. We use our office as the testing ground for them, so they have collected a lot of data for us, so that I can then share with my staff to see what you better properly wash your hands and wear your mask and so on. Yeah. So these are interesting developments that create a lot of opportunities.
And Charles, do you see similar opportunities?
Yes, it's really amazing because Hong Kong is very diversified economy. So we have a very lot of traditional pillars of the economy, from finance to logistics, transport, retail, trading, and so on. And we've seen in the last 6 months in particular, the rate of the adoption of these technology, of these traditional pillars of the economy, adopting technology is really, really very fast paced, where they are forced in a way where, sometimes crisis brings, you're really forced to do something and you don't have a choice. You either continue or die, and then they're very practical. So we've seen a lot of adoption from, we see a lot of things coming up now with food tech, to education technology, to logistic tech, to all sorts of technology that are being adopted by these traditional sectors of the economy. And of course, the driving engine moving forward is the innovation technology agenda, where we talk about AI, robotics, machine learning, smart manufacturing, smart city technologies, and health technologies really being the driving force. And of course, without, not mentioning fintech, which is also a driving force for this whole innovation. And the beauty of this convergence that we see is that you see these traditional sectors and these new emerging technologies together with these existing technologies that are being adopted by the traditional sectors, which really makes a real amazing, magical transformation that we see in a city.
There's been like opportunities in industry and startups. James, you mentioned a bit about maturity. Do you think COVID-19 would help Hong Kong's system in terms of maturing as an ecosystem?
Yeah, I certainly believe it would. I mean, right now we're under pressure from not just COVID, but other external factors. And I think the startup community here will step up to the plate. I think the maturity of these teams would automatically make them think at a higher level. They're coming in at a different perspective. COVID-19 is always going to be a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing for some teams because they're going to learn how to pivot, possibly find new revenue streams, and I think revenue is very important these days. A curse because some teams who are possibly not as mature or nimble will be greatly affected. So there's definitely opportunities, but there's also a lot of pitfalls that we all got to be concerned about.
And for Cindy, like you mentioned again, robustness at the start, like past 6 months, especially within your portfolio of startups you see in Hong Kong, what has been some of the impacts felt from COVID-19, and are you seeing certain, again, opportunities for them?
Yeah, of course, I would say challenge is much bigger than opportunity, I would say. Most of our portfolio companies are really, trying to survive, be it to pivot their business model or to cut back on their cash burn. And it's really, really hard to do any fundraising right now. And so they just have to find new ways of really to stay afloat. So one program that our fund has been doing is a loan program to the startups to help them to really get through this very difficult time. And talking about pivoting business model, of course, like logistics tech and also biotech, we have two companies, Pickup and GoGoVan, helping the governments to do the logistics for the testing kit for COVID-19. And we also have a startup called Prenetics, which was doing the DNA testing. But of course, during this very difficult time, they opened up their lab to help to do the COVID-19 tests, which are very good examples of how they pivot in order to, you know, really to survive and grow. But for the rest of the portfolio, they are really focusing on how to survive. This also, you know, opened up the question. Of course, the government have been doing a lot of things to help them, but at the same time, whether there are things that we can do more for the ecosystem to, you know, to really face another, you know, challenge going forward. So one thing that actually Peter and myself were thinking that maybe like the venture debt scene should be, you know, more, you should be built up, or we should put more efforts on that, so that in case of similar situations, founders can get us more, you know, have another avenue to get access to capital instead of, you know, only raising equity at maybe a very distressed valuation at this very difficult time and being diluted, right? So I guess it also opened up, you know, discussions how we can make this ecosystem more robust and more sustainable in the future, even there are new challenges coming.
And I think with the lockdowns in place that we've seen in the past 6 months, many ecosystems are probably having a reset or rethinking what their competitive advantage is. So question for Charles, right? In terms of Invest Hong Kong's work in attracting overseas companies, attracting investment, how do you think Hong Kong's competitive advantage has changed or become even more strengthened through the past 6 months?
Yeah, I think that the crisis really has brought and kind of put a stop to a lot of things, and we all have to relook at ourselves in the mirror and say, how do we reboot and re-strategize so that we can go further and step up? So we've been doing that in the last months because with the social unrest we had last year up until after, followed by the COVID-19, we had to really look at ourselves. How do we relaunch Hong Kong? And I think that going forward and moving forward, I'll borrow some words which our chief executive has been using, the best is yet to come. I really believe that. It's not trying to have a sort of positive aura, but it's really when we talk to people, when we talk to startups, when we talk to investors, when we talk to corporates, I think everybody is ready to, you know, because we've been kind of locked down for months. And after the lockdown, during the lockdown, you do a lot of soul searching. And we all have actually, even though we haven't physically met with a lot of our friends and the members of the community, we've been engaging with each other through Zoom and phone calls and so on. And I think there's been a lot of thinking done in the last months, and we're ready to really relaunch. To take advantage and leverage on not only the digitalization phenomenon happening using technology as an enabler, but also tapping into the opportunities that we see ahead of us. The Greater Bay Area is a very important agenda that we are looking at. With the infrastructure that we've laid out, of course, now we have to wait for the borders to be open, but nevertheless, there's a lot of work that is being done right now as we speak to work with our stakeholders and champions, not only in the Greater Bay Area, but also in other parts of ASEAN and in Asia and the rest of the world. And as I said, Hong Kong is in a state of readiness to really relaunch ourselves, to leverage on the technologies that are coming up here. And the reason I say that is because we see the momentum coming up from the investors, even though investors and startups are kind of have slowed down. They all have to survive. They all have to find new opportunities, new ways of doing things. And I think Hong Kong's environment is really ideal. This ecosystem that we talked about is really ideal for people to come and test new things, whether it is at the Cyberport or at the Science Park or other places in Hong Kong, to test their model, to test new things, to leverage and talk to investors and potential investors that they could be talking to and leveraging with, and also working with the corporates with the corporates who also already are looking for solutions. Yesterday, I was at a sort of finale of the hackathon. It was a 36-hour hackathon that was done just last night as part of the Impact Summit program. And it was just amazing to see the innovation and ideas that these startups are coming up to solve some of the problems that exist. And I think that this is extremely encouraging. And they're here because they see that they can use Hong Kong to grow their business, to find access to funding, to access talent, and also access to new markets.
You mentioned about access to markets and talent. I think, Peter, with your work at Cyberport, a lot of it is about industry development, talent cultivation. Can you share a little bit more about that and how it value adds to Hong Kong as an innovation hub?
Sure. I think riding on what Charles mentioned just now about the relaunch. That's actually something that we all should focus very much on now, because this thing will go away, will subside. There will be a new normal that we will have to handle. So it's important that we now prepare ourselves for this relaunch or whatever we call it, that will come back. Yeah. And for us, on industry development, one of the key things that we are now preparing ourselves for is that now Hong Kong is a place, a city that is honestly very well compared to other surrounding cities in managing the COVID-19 situation. So in this process, we have make use of a lot of innovation and technology applications to enhance the measures to the managing of the situation. Now this experience actually is something that is a very good opportunity to develop further and make it as something that is an exportable, a service that we can share with other economies, neighborhood economies. Like in Cyberport, we have organized, our community on a campaign that we call Braving the Epidemic. Cindy mentioned just now about some of the services that is actually both Pickup and GoGoVan are Cyberport, companies. So they have come up with this service as one of the Braving the Epidemic application. There are now over 40-something, close to 50 applications that we have developed under this campaign, Braving the Epidemic campaign. And this is now something that we are working with various organizations like the TDC and the government and so on to make sure that actually we can, in a way, export this to develop the industry further, riding on our experience in managing the situation, making use of innovation and technology to overseas markets. So this is one thing we definitely will be focusing very much on in terms of the industry development initiative. For talent cultivation, it has always been something that we focus very much on, because we can't do anything without really talents. Everything is based on people. And Cindy mentioned just now, we are facing challenges definitely on the funding situation now. Even though there are opportunities that are new application that we can develop to make riding on the managing the COVID-19 situation are very well received, accepted. We need money for these funding for these startups to sustain and grow to a state that actually they can be self-sufficient and becomes very successful. So there is this situation now in the funding market that we need to work with them on, so that we are working with various government organizations to make sure that there is funding provided to them to sustain the talent development. We will create jobs. Government has recently also announced a program called FAST, the FinTech anti-epidemic scheme for talent development, which they have entrusted Cyberport, to administer. So we will be creating 1,000 jobs for the FinTech community to sustain their development, so that they will not be affected that much, by the COVID-19 situation, and ride on this situation to provide, more services to make sure that we have a continuous supply, continuous development of our FinTech talents. And this will apply to other areas of talents too.
So you mentioned a bit about talent and also community. So question for Cindy and James before we open up to the floor for questions, right? you have worked with founders from around Hong Kong, around the world. James, you've met with a lot of ecosystems, other ecosystems around the world. How does Hong Kong's founders or community of ecosystem builders compare? And what are lessons that we can learn from people who are overseas? So maybe beginning with Cindy.
I'm very fortunate that last year, as part of the Startup Festival, and we organized the Jumpstarter Global Pitch Competition, and we opened up to receive business plans from around the world. So at the end, we have about 600 submissions, and our team went to North America, in Toronto, in San Francisco, and then in Europe, in London, and Southeast Asia in KL, and also 3 cities in China to host the semi-pitch. And of course, in each place, we meet with a lot of the startup founders face-to-face, and also to discuss with them afterwards. So what I see is, first of all, in terms of the stage of development, I would say Southeast Asian countries are still perhaps maybe earlier compared to places like Hong Kong, London, or the Bay Area. So what I mean is I see a lot of ideas solving the problems for consumer needs. Say, for example, logistics for e-commerce, and also payment, because I think Southeast Asia countries, there are lots of unbanked population. But if I compare it to startups like in the UK, in London, or in San Francisco, I see more application on like AI and deep tech in the product that the startup presents. So if I take a step back and see the whole picture, then I would say the Hong Kong startup scene will be a little bit between the two. So it's progressing, but still there are still room for them to catch up in terms of the application of the new technology in some of their products. And so this is for the startups. And then as a community as a whole, I would see that's like in Silicon Valley, in Canada, and also UK, the startup scene is very robust in the sense that there's a lot of community support, no matter if it's corporates or also the, family and friends. When I talk to the startups, there are, or the founders, there are a lot of serial entrepreneurs who may have failed, but they continue, and they got the support from family. But looking here in Hong Kong, our fund commissioned KPMG to do a survey for us for the last 2 years. And when we ask entrepreneurs how likely your family or your girlfriend, boyfriend will support you if you go to a startup, only 30% say they get a support from the family. And when we ask university students, the result is even more alarming, only 18%. So I guess this is really something that as a whole, we have to really think about how much support we are really from our hearts giving to our founders or the young people who want to do something different. So we cannot just give money or things, but if deep down in my heart, if my son came, Mom, I want to do my startup, I say, no, you better go to get a profession. Then it's no use, right? So I guess really we have to change our mindset for the community.
And for James, would you give love money to your kids to start businesses?
Yeah, so basically my analysis of the startup community, I guess, in the region, I'm going to start off by saying, I always believe that you learn the most when you're the most uncomfortable. So your learning really comes when you feel uncomfortable. So if I talk about the startup community, I would say about 18 months ago, I went to a talk and I saw something called the Startup Index. And in the Startup Index, what really shocked me was that Hong Kong ranked pretty much in the lowest quartile against their competitors in Southeast Asia, always having the top quartile, always being Singapore, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. So that was something that really made me uncomfortable. And then I had to examine where we're at as an ecosystem. Now we fast forward 18 months and I could see the ecosystem has changed again. So again, take it for a grain of salt. The Startup Index was actually a small sample size of startups, but the reality is that this perception actually came out when we actually had a survey. So now we look at the ecosystem, and I'm going to go back to that theme, maturity. And because of the maturity, not just the maturity, but also the external factors that are affecting Hong Kong now. I mean, we have a bit of unrest, we have the pandemic, and we have a trade war. I think how that affects the startups in Hong Kong, I see that Hong Kong startups are actually stepping up to the challenge. They're really embracing the change. We talk about how teams could pivot. I've seen a team say, hey, I was in image recognition, but you know what? I'm gonna also get into the thermal heat market so we could go into this COVID market, because it's all about survival now. And I think we have survival instincts here in Hong Kong. I think we're very resilient. And if you had to compare it with the region, I think there are certain players that are very notable in where they are in the ecosystem, a global ecosystem for startups. But I believe Hong Kong is really racing up to the top of the game.
I want to add to what was said earlier by the other speakers, is that when we look at things 5 years ago, we've come a long way. We've had, now close to 8 unicorns. And this is, if you were to look at unicorn per capita, we're one of the highest. And this is something that hasn't happened overnight. And it was quite amazing to see how those unicorns across different industries, whether they are from logistic companies or fintech and others, have really come up in the last 4 or 5 years. And this is something that I think somebody was talking to me yesterday during the festival about how they see a lot of ponies with little unicorn coming up and coming unicorns rooming up in Hong Kong. And this is really encouraging to talk about the maturity that we're seeing, and also to the investments that has been made by the Alibaba Entrepreneur Fund, and also the things that we're seeing at Cyberport. I think that with those unicorns and upcoming unicorns, we're extremely encouraged to see these signs that it's not just from one industry, but across different industries.
I think one of the things we've heard a lot in the past 6 months is that crisis builds character. And to James' point, to Chow's point, like the current COVID situation might have given a fertile ground for some Hong Kong startups to really up their game. So we're going to open questions as well as like comments from the floor. In the light of being exciting, maybe we can volunteer someone to start us off with. I see Maggie talking to Ben from Eureka Nova. So maybe you can quickly share your thoughts with us. Like, what are your thoughts on the Hong Kong ecosystem so far this year, especially in the midst of COVID-19?
That was a big curveball, but okay. No, I have a very consistent view on Hong Kong's advantage being situated here. I think you have the best of both worlds to a certain degree. The ability to start a company relatively quickly, and with the support system locally here in Hong Kong, you really do have the foundation set for you if you were to start a startup here. And if you properly cross the border and also take advantage of the resources that are available there, and the ceiling is high on that end too in terms of support available, you really do have the ability to make both worlds be an advantage for you to start your own company here. So my view has always been Hong Kong has a pretty high foundation and an even higher ceiling.
Good to hear. And again, well answered on the curveball. Would you like to volunteer someone else from the audience to share?
I won't go too far away from me. I got Kirill here from Explorium. I'll buy you some time while I'm. Here you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Ben. It's a great question, and as I was listening to the panel, I was just thinking how often we have that conversation, and the fact that all of us are here today is actually one of the advantages. And I'm sitting next to Ben, and we were actually having a meeting a couple of days ago about things we can do together, and the fact that a lot of the corporates, startup builders, also government sponsored organizations as well, are thinking about how to work together and can easily meet virtually or in person in this dense environment, I think is a huge advantage. And it's probably very unique in many ways to Hong Kong. So it's really up to us to actually start doing more and more things together. But we have the foundation and we have the relationships, and we're all here. So we can build from here.
Exciting. Again, open up like questions to the floor, like any responses or thoughts to what the pension. Yeah, Anson.
Hey, Alex. Good morning, everyone. Great panel. Thank you for moderation, Alex. Just a couple of points. Obviously, this week, I think has been an amazing week. We're on day 4 of the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival. A question to Charles and the fact that this has been 5 years of hard work. What are your observations? You know, just looking back in the last 5 years, I think you and Jane have done an amazing job, and we've come a long way. But are we at the beginning of our journey? We heard from James, you know, looking at some of those other startup indexes from around the world. We're quite not up there at the top. I'm not going to use the S word, Singapore, but you know, we've still got a way to go. So I wanted to kind of get your views, Charles. And I think for the rest of the panel as well, where should we be focused? Should we be focused on the Greater Bay Area? Should we be focused on ASEAN? Should we be focused on FinTech? What should we be focused on? Charles?
Yes, I think that great question. We've come a long way. We're very diversified, not only economy, but also very diversified ecosystem. So we see people, 40% of our members of the ecosystem are from overseas. This diversity is really unique, and we want to leverage on that. So we've done a lot of things that, you know, the last 5 years. And one of the things I want to share with the audience is that, you know, when 6 years ago, when I went to events, I mean, I knew almost everybody, like 80% of the people I would kind of know and recognize. And now that I go to events, I barely recognize 5 or less than 5% of the people, which is amazing in terms of the engagement that we've seen from the corporates to the investors to the startups. So this is really an amazing phenomenon. So now, where do we go from here? Of course, there's a number of developments that is happening with the Greater Bay Area, as we are seeing. We've built infrastructure already, speed train connected to Shenzhen and the rest of the Bay Area. And if you look at the whole Bay Area, of which we're part of, there's no other place on earth where you have a global financial center, which Hong Kong is, where you have a global innovation center, which Shenzhen is recognized as the capital of hardware in the world. And also with this inland, where you have manufacturing, but also a market on its own right of 71 million people that we can tap into. So we don't have to go very far. What ecosystem where you have, if you were to look at it from a New York, US perspective, if you bring New York, Silicon Valley, and Texas all together within 1 hour, there's no other ecosystems that can match that. And this is the exciting part for us, because when we look at it from the startup perspective, the investor's perspective, or the corporate perspective, is that you want to go into a place where you can scale up. You can scale up very quickly, whether you're in B2B or B2C. You want to go into a place where there are a lot of innovators around, where you can get things done very quickly, very effectively, and where you can adapt and adopt things very quickly. And you can start a prototyping to commercialization within 2 weeks, within 1 week, within 3 weeks, and that is something very unique. And we haven't actually leveraged enough on this. And so moving forward, we are going to be tapping into this, because now we have the speed train that connects us to Shenzhen in 15 minutes, to Guangzhou in 45 minutes. We've got the best universities in this region. We have 4 of them in the first 100 ranking, and all of them actually have presence in the Greater Bay Area to really leverage on research and a lot of differentiating factors. And also, not only the ideation to commercialization, not only funding, but also the accessible marketplace to not only Greater Bay Area, but also the Greater Asian region. Because companies come here, they are really looking at that as a prototyping. It's a great test market, as Peter was saying earlier. It's a great test market. So you come here, you test things very quickly, and then you scale it. And of course, getting funding as well. So even though funding is not that easy today because of all the changes happening, but if you have a good model, if you have a great model that you can solve a problem, you can scale up, you should be able to get funding here.
Yes. Absolutely. We, through Cyberport, in short, you basically can get $1.1 million for, all the, schemes as a startup to, open a company, to scaling up and so on with free rental and so on. So all these are there. And then there is additional funding because of the epidemic situation and so on that the government are now injecting into the market to create more jobs and so on. Yeah, so all these are there. And more importantly, also now, like Cindy mentioned earlier, that we would very much like to see, government also, stepping up in enhancing the development of the investment market to let more investors, support the maturing companies and so on. But going back to, I would like to also address, your questions on what are the areas that we probably should focus on, fintech, Greater Bay Area or whatever. Now, to me, if we look at this more systematically or structurally, now whatever we do, my philosophy is that also, at Cyberport, we are practicing this, is that if we want to make things successful, you have to look at the market needs and also your differential advantage. Because everybody, if you're doing something that everybody wants, but then you're doing something that everybody can provide, then why you? Yeah, we have to leverage on our differential advantage. Now, Charles mentioned just now a lot related to our infrastructure advantage. We have good communications. We have this speed train infrastructure connecting to the Greater Bay Area cities, and we have the universities creating generating a lot of talents and so on with companies or organizations like Cyberport with this kind of platform to facilitate the development of entrepreneurs. Now, these are all, you can say, part of the infrastructure that we provide. And then we have also the system, advantage, including, the legal system that we have, that most of the Western companies are familiar with, internationally sort of connected and so on. So these are also advantages. And riding on this advantage, we should also, look at what are the differential, advantage in terms of the application areas that we have. Fintech definitely is one thing because we're an international finance center. So we have, in the past many years, cultivated a lot of financial talents. And then we now, with the need for technology to reinvent, financial services, we will definitely have a large, demand on that. And for the last few years, you can see a lot of these developments that's proven, to be the case, that a lot of fintech companies are now sprouting and mushrooming to make sure that they meet the market needs and so on. Now, there is also another thing that I mentioned just now, riding on the COVID-19 situation. We can look at, smart living in terms of healthcare services, in terms of medical services and so on, like the Braving the Epidemic campaign that I mentioned just now. We're trying to organize these applications together so that we then, have an area that we have a unique differential advantage, because we have done this successfully. The neighboring economies can see actually Hong Kong is managing this well, so that through innovation and technology applications, how they can also adopt some of these things. Now, this create also a market, for us to, go overseas and help the industry development. So all these things are things that actually we should look at. And the principle to me is we look at our differential advantage. We leverage on what we can offer different from the others, and then we ride on that. Now, on your point about Greater Bay Area, now a lot of attention has been given to trying to see how Hong Kong companies can actually further develop into the Greater Bay cities or Greater Bay market and so on. That definitely is something that we should look at. But at the same time, I would very much also like to advocate the other way around. That is how we can make use of Hong Kong as the hub to get the Greater Bay Area companies in other, 9+1, cities to come to Hong Kong and go out, and make use of Hong Kong as a springboard, to go to the other, ASEAN cities, economies, to the BR, Belt and Road cities, and so on. Now, these are again some of the things that we have our inherent, advantage to facilitate them to do. So, going back, to answering your question, I think, all of the above that you mentioned, but then, in an integrated way such that we leverage on our differential advantage.
So I think we're almost out of time. So one final question for all four of you.
Thank you. Sorry, am I taking the last question? I actually just wanted to make a comment, actually based on what Cindy's comments were about talent development and a few other issues. I mean, here it's fantastic that we're having this discourse, but we're almost preaching to the converted. We're all here working within the ecosystem. We see the benefits. And, we forget sometimes that that is not as widespread in the, in outside of our community, the startup community here. And one of the fundamental things is, it's true, we need to find some way of showing to parents or, family that there's something good for young talent to consider starting up. I mean, at universities, they encourage it for sure, but outside of that, and even though there are all these fantastic programs in place like Cyberport and other institutions, there has to be some kind of fundamental support for this. And, I mean, I don't have a solution for this. I just keep thinking, pondering this as our ecosystem develops. The other thing that's related to that as well, I feel, is one of the successes of overseas ecosystems is the fact that you've got serial entrepreneurs who've done this again and again. And as Cindy mentioned, they failed and they've come, dusted themselves and started back up again. And arguably, that's what has given, with the West Coast of the US, some real serious advantages. Here in Hong Kong, and I can't remember which study, maybe it was yours as well, which mentioned that if once a person, a founder sort of like fails here, it's actually very hard to get them back in again. They tend to give up and just say, okay, they suddenly take on this corporate position. And I just think, maybe it's just the evolution of our startup ecosystem, but as a community builder, this keeps me worrying. It keeps me thinking we need to get ourselves to our next place where this is almost self-sustaining, that you don't have the kind of like people leaving the ecosystem and you have to spend so much work to try and get them to go into the startups again. I think we should definitely acknowledge that, because to me, the funding is not really going to be a problem going forward. I think Hong Kong has these inherent advantages that Peter says. We've got the market opportunities as well. And frankly, we've got so many really strong industry here that when they get interested, there's going to be a very vibrant marketplace. But we need to look at the mentorship of those serial entrepreneurs. And we do really need to look at how do we encourage family and parents and all these people to really embrace that their kid is actually doing something really worthwhile. And I think it just needs to be acknowledged.
I think with one quick comment and one final question.
So thank you. I'm Alvin from TouchSpark Hong Kong, which we are an innovation platform that has accelerators and VC originated from Tsinghua University in China. So, actually as a ecosystem builder that is not, really located in Hong Kong originally, we always think about how to bring the resources in China and other places around the world to Hong Kong, because we believe that, of course, Hong Kong has a very good talent pool, a very nice environment for fundraising, and all of the other advantages. And we believe the interaction between Hong Kong ecosystem and the ecosystem in China, which actually, benefit to each, benefit to both sides. So, my question is to all panelists, actually. So, as an ecosystem builder originated from China, what are some of the advices that, in your perspective, that we can do to help us to bring and attract the resources and talents and entrepreneurs from China and all around the world to Hong Kong? Thank you.
quickly add to that too, because back to Jane's point, fundamental question is what more can ecosystem builders do for the ecosystem? So let's end off with that, beginning with James.
I mean, we always try to help all different levels of the ecosystem here. We even run programs, Jumpstart Kids, starting from age 8 to 12. We actually try to introduce innovation in a fun way. So we work with kids, then we go higher up. And when we're going back to your question a bit was, we actually are trying to do a program where we're bringing in roadshows into the Greater Bay Area. We're bringing Series A startups from around the world to come for 10 days. And I think these are just small touches, introductions to actually bring teams to understand what's happening in Hong Kong, the Greater Bay, and how it could actually bring upward advantages to these startups.
Very quickly to your point, I think perhaps one word, collaboration. Yeah, if we can, take this, further, all these sort of like what you said, ecosystem builder, whatever, should, work together even further. Then we can perhaps, see new things coming up. Like what I said earlier, you can use Hong Kong as the springboard, to go out and let your Chinese-based or mainland-based companies to go to other, markets. That's one thing. And also going back to what Jane and also Cindy has mentioned earlier, I actually want to, try to see if we can set up a campaign together that is called First Job Entrepreneur. Now, say now if we work together on this campaign, that we promote entrepreneurship as the first choice for your career development, or at least first in terms of not so much the best, yeah, but then the first step to when you go into the career development of the job market. Instead of first, finding very comfortable multinational jobs or whatever, but first job as entrepreneur. Start this campaign and we work together. I can even come up with slogans like, first job, entrepreneur, next stop, the Mills, yeah, something like that, whatever, yeah. So things like that we can, jointly work together and have this collaboration of various ecosystem sort of builders or platforms like the Mills, like Erica Nova, like Explorium, and so on, or Cyberport. Yeah, then we can really make a difference. Yeah, try to complement each other.
So for me, it's like based on piggybacking on what Peter and James was saying earlier, is like reinventing ourselves in this very difficult moment in time. Reinventing ourselves to fill the gaps, because we've got gaps here. How do we reinvent ourselves and collaborate, of course, to really transform to the next level? And I think that we have an opportunity, a unique opportunity to do that. I think just judging by the presence of people here in this room, a lot of the ecosystem builders, as well as how do we work together? How do we reinvent ourselves to go to the next level and transform and fill the gaps that we have here?
Well, I think Hong Kong has always been a very attractive place for startups to come over. Even during the social unrest last year, there is one of the largest insurance company in Canada. They came over and set up a VC arm in Hong Kong. So I was talking to the person in charge and said, wow, it is really, amazing to see that you make the move even during the social unrest and now COVID-19. So because he do see the opportunities here. And for our portfolio, actually just before COVID-19, we closed an investment into an Israeli company doing hospitality tech. And they have the plan to come and set up a regional hub in Hong Kong because they see the potential markets in Asia. And Hong Kong is a very good location. And we didn't touch on the geopolitical situation. And actually, the situation also posed a good opportunity for Hong Kong. One of our portfolio companies from Bay Area is doing semiconductor design. And because of issues in the West, so they have basically moved most of the teams here in Hong Kong and also in Southeast Asia, so that they can be closer to the manufacturing base. At the same time, I think the geopolitical issues will be less in this region. So I guess Hong Kong has always its attractiveness in really opening up to talents from different sectors to come and be here. But one thing I think maybe the government or everyone here have to think of ways to work on is the cost of living. Our cost per square foot is really high. So entrepreneurs, especially when they at the very first start, it's very hard for them to get to cover their own cost of living if they want to stay in Hong Kong. So how we can really drive down the cost of living, especially on the property price, will be a very important thing that everyone has to think about. And by then, I believe Hong Kong is a very good place to really attract talents from different places and also different sectors to come here and as a launching pad.
I think with that, we are officially off time. Thank you very much for joining us here today. Thank you for sharing. And like to Jane's point, as ecosystem builders, let's go out there and continue strengthening the ecosystem. Thank you very much today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex, and thank you all the panelists.